Settle into a comfortable position. Let the tensions of your day begin to dissolve. Tonight, we journey back through time to a period when the world was consumed by war. Yet our focus rests on something quieter, more intimate. We will explore the experience of being a child in Britain during the Second World War, not through the lens of battles or grand strategy, but through the small, human moments that defined those years. Imagine yourself standing on a railway platform in September 1939. The air carries the scent of coal smoke and anxiety. Around you, thousands of children gather with small suitcases and labels tied around their necks, each bearing a name and a number. These are the evacuees' children, about to be separated from everything familiar, sent away from danger, sent away from home. Over the course of this journey together, we will walk beside these children. We will feel the confusion of arrival in strange villages. We will witness events that shaped their world, the desperate beaches of Dunkirk, the quiet brilliance of codebreakers at Bletchley Park, the transformed lives of those who remained behind on the home front. But first, we begin with the children themselves and what it meant to be torn from home in the name of safety. Let us step back now to those early days of September 1939, when Operation Pied Piper began and childhood itself became a casualty of war. The morning you leave London begins like any other, except it does not. Your mother wakes you earlier than usual, her movements brisk and purposeful, though you notice her hands tremble slightly as she buttons your coat. She has packed your small suitcase the night before, 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, a comb, one treasured toy if there is room. Around your neck, she ties a brown label with string, the kind you have seen on parcels at the post office. The label bears your name, your school, and a number. You are now, in a sense, a piece of luggage to be delivered safely to an unknown destination. Your mother's eyes are bright, but she does not cry. Not yet. She tells you this is an adventure, that you will be safe in the countryside, away from the bombs that everyone knows are coming. You do not fully understand what bombs mean, though you have seen the preparations. Sandbags stacked against buildings, windows crisscrossed with tape, the air raid shelters being dug in the park. At the railway station, the platform teems with children. Thousands of them, all wearing labels, all carrying small cases or paper parcels tied with string. The noise is overwhelming crying babies, shouting teachers trying to maintain order, mothers calling last-minute instructions to their children. The air smells of coal smoke and perspiration and something else, something you cannot quite name. It is fear, though you are too young to recognize it. Your mother netches down to your level. She smooths your hair, straightens your collar one more time. She tells you to be good, to listen to your teachers, to write letters. You nod, still not entirely certain why you are leaving. The war has been declared, but nothing has happened yet. London looks the same as it always has. Why must you go? Then the whistle blows. Teachers begin herding children toward the train carriages. Your mother kisses your forehead, and suddenly you are being pulled away, swept along in a tide of children. You turn back to wave, and she is there on the platform, growing smaller as the train begins to move. She is waving. She is smiling. But now, finally, she is crying. The train journey stretches on for hours. You sit pressed against other children, some from your school, others you have never seen before. The younger ones cry. The older ones try to appear brave, though their faces betray them. Your teacher moves through the carriage, offering encouraging words that do not quite reach your eyes. Through the window, you watch London's familiar streets give way to suburbs, then to open countryside. Many of you have never seen the countryside before. You are children of narrow streets and brick buildings, of corner shops and trams. The fields that roll past the window seem impossibly vast and empty. Where are the houses? Where are the people? This landscape is as foreign to you as another country might be. Someone starts singing, "Run, Rabbit, Run," and others join in, their voices thin and uncertain. The song falters and dies away. The rhythm of the train becomes hypnotic, a clacking of wheels on tracks, the gentle swaying of the carriage. Some children sleep, their heads resting on neighbors' shoulders. Others stare out the window, faces blank with exhaustion and bewilderment. You clutch your small suitcase on your lap. Inside is everything you will have of home. 2 sets of clothes, a photograph of your family if you are lucky, perhaps a letter from your mother that you are not supposed to read until tonight. The weight of it on your knees is somehow comforting, tangible proof that home still exists, that you are not simply disappearing into nothing. The train finally stops at a small rural station. The name on the platform sign means nothing to you. Teachers begin organizing children into lines, checking names against lists. Everyone is tired, hungry, confused. The afternoon sun slants across the platform, warm on your face, but you feel cold inside. From the station, you walk through the village. It is impossibly quiet compared to London. No rumble of traffic, no factory whistles, no vendors calling their wares. The silence feels thick, almost oppressive. Your shoes, suitable for London pavements, seem too loud on the country lane. Local people stand in their doorways or peer from windows, watching this invasion of city children with expressions you cannot read. You are led to the village hall. Inside, chairs have been arranged in rows, and a billeting officer, a stern-looking man with a clipboard, instructs you all to sit and wait. The hall smells of wood polish and dampness. Dust motes dance in the light, streaming through high windows. You sit with your labeled neck and your small suitcase and wait to see what happens next. Then the host families begin to arrive. They walk slowly along the rows of children, examining faces, assessing appearances. You understand, with a child's sharp intuition, that you are being chosen, or not chosen. It is like the awful feeling at school when teams are picked for games, except this matters more than any game ever could. A woman stops in front of you. She looks you up and down, notes your clean face, your reasonably well-kept clothes. She asks your age. She asks if you wet the bed. The directness of the question, asked in front of everyone, makes your cheeks burn. The billeting officer shows her your papers. She nods finally and says she will take you. You stand up, uncertain whether to feel relieved or terrified. Probably both. Some children are not chosen so quickly. The grubbier ones, the ones who cough, the ones whose clothes are too ragged, the ones who are simply unlucky, they sit longer, watching other children leave with their temporary families. The woman who has chosen you takes your hand. Her palm is rough and warm. She leads you out of the village hall, into a life you cannot yet imagine. The cottage you are taken to sits at the end of a lane, surrounded by fields. It is smaller than your London tenement flat, but somehow seems larger because it is quiet and the ceilings are lower. Everything smells different here. Wood smoke and something green and growing, earth and animals. Not the familiar London, smells of soot and cooking and too many people living too close together. The woman you are to call her Mrs. Henderson shows you where you will sleep. It is a small room under the eaves, with a sloping ceiling and a narrow iron bedstead. The mattress is thin, but the sheets are clean. There is a hook on the back of the door for your clothes, and a small wooden chair by the window. This room, these few square feet, will be your entire private domain for however long this lasts. Mrs. Henderson brings you tea and bread with real butter, not the margarine you are used to. The bread is thick-cut and fresh. You are hungry enough to eat, despite the knot in your stomach. She watches you eat with an expression you cannot decipher. Not unkind, but not exactly warm either. She is doing her duty, you sense. Taking in an evacuee because it is expected, because there is a payment involved, because it is the right thing to do. But you are not her child. After tea, there is the question of washing. She shows you the privy in the back garden and outdoor toilet, a shock after the indoor facilities you had in London, modest as they were. The water for washing must be heated on the stove. Everything requires more effort here, more planning. She gives you a flannel and a sliver of soap and leaves you to manage on your own. That first night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, you become aware of how dark the countryside is. In London, there were always street lamps, lights from other windows, the glow of the city that never quite faded. Here, when the lamp is extinguished, the darkness is absolute, and the sounds, the creaking of the house settling, the rustle of trees outside your window, the distant cry of some animal you cannot identify. Each sound makes your heart race. You pull the rough blankets up to your chin and try not to cry. You promised your mother you would be brave. In the days that follow, you begin to understand how different this world is from everything you have known. Mrs. Henderson's husband is a farm laborer. They rise before dawn, eat porridge thick enough to stand a spoon in, and spend their days at work that seems to have no end. The rhythm of their lives is dictated by seasons and weather and animals, not by factory whistles and bus schedules. You are accustomed to London's noise and crowding, to playing in streets and buying sweets from corner shops. Here, the nearest shop is a mile's walk away. Entertainment means listening to the wireless in the evening or reading by lamplight. There is no cinema, no crowds of children playing street games, no familiar landmarks. The landscape itself feels threatening in its openness. So much sky, so much space, nowhere to hide if you needed to. The Hendersons find you equally foreign. Your accent marks you immediately as a Londoner. The way you speak, the words you use, the stories you tell of life in the city, all of it is alien to them. Mrs. Henderson purses her lips when you mention that your father works in a factory. She and her husband are not wealthy, but they consider themselves respectable, and there is a distinction, apparently, between rural poverty and urban poverty. At the village school, the differences become even more apparent. The local children regard the evacuees with a mixture of curiosity and hostility. You are invaders in their small, settled world. Your London clothes look shabby next to their country tweeds. Your knowledge is different from theirs. You can navigate the underground, but cannot tell wheat from barley. They can milk a cow. You have barely seen a cow before arriving here. Some of the clashes are small. You do not understand why you must remove your muddy shoes before entering the house in your London tenement. A bit of dirt hardly mattered. Mrs. Henderson does not understand why you seem so frightened of the farm animals. To her, they are simply part of life. To you, a horse is an enormous, unpredictable creature, and chickens are vaguely alarming with their quick movements and sharp beaks. You are fortunate, in your way. Mrs. Henderson is not warm, but neither is she cruel. She feeds you adequately, ensures you attend school, and leaves you largely to yourself. You learn that this is a kind of luck. Not all evacuees are so fortunate. In whispered conversations at school, you hear other stories. Some children have been taken in by families who genuinely care for them, who tuck them in at night and read them stories and treat them as their own. One boy, Terry, tells of a couple who dote on him, who take him fishing and teach him to ride a bicycle. His letters home glow with contentment, and you feel a pang of envy. But there are darker stories too. Children treated as unpaid servants, forced to work long hours before and after school. Girls made to scrub floors until their hands bleed. Boys sent to sleep in unheated sheds or barns. Evacuees fed scraps while the host family eats proper meals. These stories circulate in the schoolyard, shared in hushed voices. You do not know if all of them are true, but you know some are. One girl, Mary, rarely speaks. She has a bruise on her arm that she tries to hide. When a teacher asks about it, she says she fell. Everyone knows she did not fall. But what is to be done? The system is overwhelmed with millions of evacuees. Checking on each child's welfare is impossible. Mary endures, as children do, because there is no alternative. You realize that being an evacuee is a kind of lottery. The label around your neck, the village hall selection, the chance of which family happened to choose you, these random factors determine whether your evacuation will be bearable or miserable. You have drawn a middle card in this lottery. Not the best, not the worst. You are fed and sheltered and left alone. It could be worse. You tell yourself this on the nights when homesickness threatens to overwhelm you. It could be worse. Every week, you write home. The letters are brief, labored over, constrained by what you are allowed to say and what you can bear to say. Dear Mom and Dad, you write in your careful script, I am well. The countryside is nice. Mrs. Henderson is kind. I like it here. Do not worry about me. Love, your name. Every word is a lie, and a truth twisted into something palatable. You are not well, you are homesick and lonely and confused. The countryside is not nice. It is strange and frightening. Mrs. Henderson is not unkind, but calling her kind feels dishonest. You do not like it here, but what purpose would it serve to say so? And as for not worrying, you know they are worried, just as you worry about them. Your mother's letters arrive less frequently than you wish. When they do come, you read them so many times the paper grows soft at the folds. She writes of small things, your father's work, your grandmother's health, the neighbors' doings. She does not write about the bombing raids that have now begun in earnest. She does not mention the sleepless nights in shelters, the destroyed buildings, the casualties. She is protecting you, just as you are protecting her. Sometimes there are long gaps between letters. Days stretch into weeks with no word. During these silences, your imagination runs wild. What if the house has been hit? What if they are injured or worse? What if you will never see them again? The fear sits in your chest like a stone, making it hard to breathe. When a letter finally arrives, you clutch it to you and feel weak with relief. They are alive. For now, they are alive. The stilted nature of these letters creates a strange distance. You cannot share what your life is really like, and they cannot share theirs. The connection that was once immediate and constant is now mediated by paper and postage and a careful omission of anything too frightening or sad. You are growing apart, and there is nothing either of you can do about it. Twice during your years of evacuation, your mother manages to visit. The first time, you have been gone nearly a year. You wait at the station, hardly able to stand still, your heart pounding so hard it feels like it might burst. When she steps off the train, you barely recognize her for a moment. She seems smaller than you remembered, older. But then she sees you and smiles, and you run into her arms. The visit lasts only a few hours. You walk her around the village, show her the school, take her to the field where you sometimes play. You want to tell her everything about the homesickness, about the strangeness of this life, about how much you miss home. But with Mrs. Henderson hovering nearby, and the hours so precious and limited, you find you cannot. Instead, you make small talk, point out landmarks that mean nothing to her, pretend everything is fine. When it is time for her to leave, the parting is almost worse than the original separation. At least then, you did not know what you were losing. Now you do. You watch her train pull away, and the loneliness that descends is like a physical weight. Mrs. Henderson, uncomfortable with your tears, tells you to stop sniveling and come help with the washing up. The second visit, 2 years later, is even stranger. You have changed, grown taller, your accent beginning to take on rural inflections, your mannerisms adapted to country life. Your mother seems like a visitor from a half-remembered dream. The city she describes in her conversation, the bombed-out buildings, the restrictions, the weariness feels like a different world from the one you left. You are no longer certain where you belong. You are 8 years old when you are evacuated. At 8, you cannot fully grasp the complexities of war, the strategic necessities, the reasons why this separation is deemed essential. What you understand is simpler and more devastating. Your parents have sent you away. No matter how many times it is explained that this is for your safety, a part of your child's mind interprets it differently. You have done something wrong. You are being punished. They do not want you anymore. These thoughts are irrational, but they are persistent. They color your dreams and your waking hours. Some of the younger children fare worse. You see them at school 5-year-olds who cannot understand why their mothers do not come, who ask every day when they can go home, who wet their beds and cry themselves to sleep. The teachers try to comfort them, but what comfort can there be? They want their mothers, and their mothers are not here. The psychological impact of this separation will not be fully understood for decades. Later, researchers will use attachment theory to study former evacuees, discovering that many develop insecure attachment styles, that the trauma of those years echoes through entire lives. But in 1940, 1941, 1942, there is no time for such considerations. There is only survival, and the hope that the damage will not be permanent. You develop strategies for coping. You stop thinking about home constantly, because it hurts too much. You focus on the present school lessons, daily chores, the small rituals that structure your days. You make a friend, another evacuee, and together you create a world of imagination that briefly transports you beyond the confines of this life. You become resilient because you must. There is no alternative. What was supposed to last a few months extends into years. The war that everyone thought would be over quickly settles into a long, grinding endurance test. You celebrate birthdays away from home. You grow out of your clothes and are given hand-me-downs from Mrs. Henderson's nephew. You learn to navigate rural life, how to avoid the aggressive goose in the farmyard, which paths turn to mud in rain, the best places to find blackberries in late summer. School becomes your constant. The same classrooms, the same teachers, the same lessons that continue regardless of the war raging across the world. You learn your times tables and the counties of England and the dates of the Norman conquest. History is taught as something that happened long ago, not something you are living through. The war, meanwhile, is a distant thing. You hear about it on the wireless, see the newsreels at the rare cinema trips, read the newspapers when you can. But it does not touch you directly here in this quiet village. Sometimes planes fly overhead. You learn to distinguish the sound of British engines from German ones. Once, a German bomber, damaged and lost, crashes in a field 2 miles away. Everyone rushes to see. The crew is dead. You stare at the wreckage and try to connect it to the war, to your parents in London, to everything that has brought you to this moment. You cannot quite manage it. Gradually, imperceptibly, this strange life becomes normal. You stop expecting to go home soon. You accept the rhythm of Mrs. Henderson's household, the patterns of the agricultural year, the social structures of the village. You are still an outsider. You will always be the evacuee, the London child, but you learn your place. You adapt because children are remarkably adaptable. It is both their strength and their tragedy. In May 1945, Germany surrenders. The war in Europe is over. The announcement is met with celebration street parties, flags, Churchill's voice on the wireless declaring victory. You are told you will be going home. You expect to feel joy. Instead, you feel numb and frightened. Home has become an abstract concept. Your real daily life is here. Mrs. Henderson, for all her reserve, is familiar. This cottage, this village, this school, these are what you know now. London, your parents, your old neighborhood, these feel like memories from a story you were once told. The journey home reverses the journey out. You board a train with your battered suitcase, older now, no longer requiring a label around your neck. You are nearly 12 more than a quarter of your life has been spent as an evacuee. The train carries you back through countryside that no longer seems quite so strange, toward a city you no longer quite remember. London is devastated. Entire streets are gone, replaced by rubble and empty spaces like missing teeth. The landmarks you remember are changed or destroyed. Your own neighborhood has been hit, not your building mercifully, but others nearby. The landscape of your childhood has been erased. Your parents wait at the station. You see them and experience a strange disconnect. They are older, worn, marked by years of war and worry. Your mother's hair is more gray. Your father walks with a slight limp from an injury during fire-watching duty. They embrace you, exclaim over how tall you have grown, try to reclaim a child they have not seen in 5 years. That night, in your old home, everything feels wrong. The flat is smaller than you remembered. The sounds of the city traffic, voices, the omnipresent noise, are overwhelming after years of rural quiet. Your bed is familiar, but feels strange. Your parents are strangers wearing familiar faces. They do not know how to talk to you, and you do not know how to talk to them. The easy intimacy of your early childhood is gone, severed by 5 years of separation and a world war. Reintegration is supposed to happen naturally. You are home. Everything should return to normal. But normal no longer exists. You have changed. They have changed. The world has changed. Your parents try to reclaim the relationship they had with an 8-year-old child, but you are not that child anymore. You have learned to be self-sufficient, to not expect comfort, to guard your emotional vulnerabilities. When your mother tries to embrace you, you stiffen. When your father attempts to establish parental authority, you resist. These are not conscious choices. They are the residue of years spent learning not to need them. Some evacuees never fully reconcile with their families. The separation was too long, too complete. They carry the scars in visibly difficulty, forming attachments, a persistent sense of abandonment, an inability to trust that anyone will stay. Decades later, researchers will find that former evacuees report lower levels of psychological well-being, higher rates of insecure attachment, more difficulty maintaining relationships. But there is resilience too. You have survived something that seemed unsurvivable. You have endured separation and uncertainty and fear. You have adapted to a world turned upside down. These experiences, traumatic as they were, have also made you stronger in ways you will not fully appreciate until much later. It is important to understand that the evacuation was necessary. The bombing of London and other cities was real and devastating. Thousands of civilians died. Had the children remained, many more would have been killed or injured. The evacuation program, Operation Pied Piper, saved countless young lives. But necessity does not eliminate trauma. Something can be the right decision strategically while remaining devastating personally. The evacuee children were protected from bombs, but exposed to a different kind of damage: psychological, emotional, relational. These wounds, less visible than physical injuries, were no less real. As you grow into adulthood, you will meet other former evacuees. You will recognize each other by certain shared markers: a particular wariness, a difficulty with goodbyes, a tendency to hold relationships at arm's length. You will share stories that those who were not evacuated cannot quite understand. There will be a bond forged in the shared experience of displacement and separation. Sometimes you will wonder what you would have been like if the war had not happened. If you had grown up in your parents' home, secure and surrounded by family, never knowing what it meant to be chosen in a village hall or to sleep in a stranger's house. But that version of yourself does not exist. You are the sum of your experiences, and evacuation is woven into the fabric of who you are. The spring of 1940 unfolds with a speed that catches everyone unprepared. On the 12th of May, German forces pour across the borders into France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. The strategy that military planners have anticipated, a slow, grinding conflict resembling the Great War, never materializes. Instead, the German advance is swift, mechanized, overwhelming. Within days, panzer divisions have punched through the Ardennes, a region the French High Command considered impassable for tanks. By the 14th of May, German armor has crossed the Meuse River, opening a gap in Allied lines. The speed of the advance creates confusion and panic. Communications break down. Supply lines are severed. Orders arrive too late or not at all. The British Expeditionary Force, approximately 400,000 men who crossed to France with confidence and purpose, finds itself outmaneuvered. French forces, Belgian troops, all are caught in the relentless tide of the German advance. By the 20th of May, German tanks reach the English Channel, effectively cutting off the Allied forces from the rest of France. The trap has closed. The British Expeditionary Force, along with French and Belgian units, is now pressed against the coast in an ever-shrinking pocket of land. Behind them lies the sea. Before them, German forces tighten their grip. The situation is, by any reasonable assessment, hopeless. Dunkirk itself is not an ideal location for evacuation. The harbor is small. The beaches, while extensive, among the longest sand beaches in Europe, slope gently, meaning that deep draft vessels cannot approach close to shore. Under different circumstances, these beaches might be pleasant. Now they become a desperate refuge for hundreds of thousands of trapped men. Imagine yourself among those soldiers arriving at Dunkirk in late May. You have been retreating for days, perhaps weeks. You are exhausted beyond anything you have previously known. Your uniform is filthy, torn, stained with mud and oil, and things you prefer not to name. You have not eaten properly in days. Sleep has been snatched in brief, restless intervals. The beaches stretch before you, vast and exposed. Already, thousands of men are there, forming long queues that extend from the dunes down to the water's edge. The organization is remarkable under the circumstances. British discipline, maintaining order even in catastrophe. Men stand in lines, patiently waiting their turn, as though queuing for a bus rather than fleeing annihilation. The town of Dunkirk behind you burns. On the 19th of May, the Luftwaffe launched a devastating bombing raid, destroying much of the harbor infrastructure and killing an estimated 1,000 civilians. The fires, with no water supply to fight them, continue to rage. Black smoke rises in great columns, visible for miles. The smell of burning wood, rubber, oil, other things permeates everything. You find a place in one of the queues and settle in to wait. Around you, men sit in the sand, some smoking cigarettes, some simply staring at the sea. The mood is subdued. There is little talk. Everyone understands the precariousness of the situation. You are sitting ducks here, completely exposed. If the German army launches a full assault, there will be no defense, no escape. The sound comes first, a distant drone that grows rapidly louder. Men look up, shading their eyes against the sun. The shapes materialize out of the sky. Luftwaffe bombers, flying in formation, with the smaller, more agile fighters accompanying them. The order is shouted down the lines. Take cover. Men scatter from the organized queues, diving into the dunes, pressing themselves flat against the sand. You throw yourself down, hands over your head, and wait. The whistle of falling bombs fills the air, a sound that seems to drill directly into your skull. Then the impact's massive concussions that shake the earth, throw up great fountains of sand and debris. The beaches, fortunately, absorb much of the explosive force. Bombs that would create terrible carnage on hard ground are partially muffled by the soft sand. Still, some find their targets. Men die, torn apart by shrapnel or buried by collapsing sand. The attack lasts minutes, but feels eternal. Then the bombers pass, the sound of their engines fading. Slowly, cautiously, men emerge from cover. Medics rush to tend the wounded. The queues begin to reform, stepping over or round the craters, continuing the patient wait. This pattern repeats throughout the days of the evacuation. The Luftwaffe launches raid after raid 12 major attacks on one day alone, dropping 15,000 high explosive bombs and 30,000 incendiary bombs. The defenders have little with which to fight back. some anti-aircraft guns, their crews working until the barrels glow red from continuous firing. And crucially, the Royal Air Force. High above the beaches, a battle rages that the men below can barely see. RAF Fighter Command, stretched thin and operating at the limits of their aircraft's range, attempts to provide air cover for the evacuation. The fighters operate from airfields in Kent, roughly 75 miles away near the maximum range for the aircraft of 1940. They fly patrol after patrol, arriving over Dunkirk in formations of 1 or 2 squadrons. Often, they are outnumbered by the Luftwaffe formations, German fighter and bomber groups that have the advantage of operating from nearby airfields in occupied France and Belgium. The RAF pilots engage with desperate intensity. They intercept bombers before they can reach the beaches, engage the German fighters in wheeling dogfights high above the smoke-shrouded coast. The combat is vicious and costly. Aircraft spiral down in flames. Pilots bail out over the channel, hoping to be picked up, knowing that the cold water leaves little time. Over the 9 days of the evacuation, the RAF flies 2,739 fighter sorties. They claim 262 enemy aircraft destroyed at a cost of 106 RAF fighters lost. The contribution is significant, disrupting German bombing runs, forcing the Luftwaffe to divert resources to fighter combat, buying time for the evacuation to proceed. But the men on the beaches do not see this. They see Luftwaffe bombers getting through. They endure the attacks with no apparent defense. A bitter question begins to circulate among the troops. Where is the RAF? It is unfair. The RAF is fighting desperately above them. But perceptions matter, and the perception from the beaches is one of abandonment. On the 24th of May, with German panzer divisions poised to overrun the Allied pocket, Adolf Hitler issues an order that will be debated by historians for decades. He commands his armor to halt. The reasons for this decision remain contested. Some argue Hitler wished to preserve his tanks for the coming assault on the rest of France. Others suggest he was swayed by Göring's assurance that the Luftwaffe alone could destroy the trapped armies. Still others believe he wished to offer Britain a chance for a negotiated peace, that annihilating the British expeditionary force would eliminate any possibility of accommodation. Whatever the motivation, the halt order provides 3 crucial days. 3 days during which the German ground forces remain stationary, while the Allies frantically organize an evacuation. It is the margin between catastrophe and survival. The British Admiralty begins planning the evacuation even before the full scale of the disaster is apparent. On the 20th of May, at Churchill's suggestion, arrangements begin for assembling all available small vessels. Initially, the expectations are bleak. Perhaps 30,000 men might be saved before the situation collapses entirely. The operation is designated Operation Dynamo, named after the Dynamo Room in Dover Castle, where the planning takes place. Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay oversees the operation from Dover, coordinating the vast armada that will attempt the impossible. The first challenge is the harbor at Dunkirk. Damaged by bombing, with wrecked ships blocking portions of it, the harbor can still accommodate larger vessels, destroyers, and transport ships capable of carrying hundreds or thousands of men. The East Mole, a long breakwater extending into the sea, becomes the primary embarkation point. It was never designed as a dock, but men can walk along it, and ships can draw alongside. The beaches present a different problem. Larger vessels cannot approach. The water is too shallow, even at high tide. Men standing in the surf, waiting to be picked up, find the water reaches their knees, perhaps their waists, but no ship of any size can come close enough. This is where the small boats become essential. Vessels shallow enough in draft to approach the beaches can ferry men out to the larger ships waiting in deeper water. And so the call goes out for every available small craft. Across southern England, boats of every description are requisitioned. Fishing trawlers, pleasure yachts, Thames River barges, lifeboats, tugboats, motor launches, ferries, anything that floats and has an engine or sails. Some are sailed by Royal Navy crews. Others are manned by their civilian owners, ordinary men fishermen, weekend sailors, ferry operators who volunteer to cross the channel into a war zone. The motivations vary. Patriotism, certainly. A sense of duty. Adventure, perhaps for a few. An unwillingness to let the Navy face this alone. The vessels begin gathering at ports along the southeast coast Dover, Ramsgate, Folkestone. The sight is extraordinary. Hundreds of small boats, many of them absurdly unsuited for open water navigation, preparing to cross 26 miles of sea to the French coast. Some of the boats are tiny. The Tamzine, a 15-foot clinker-built fishing dinghy from Margate, is possibly the smallest vessel to participate. How such a craft survives the crossing is almost miraculous. Others are only marginally larger private sailing yachts, pleasure cruisers designed for calm river days, fishing smacks that normally work close to shore. On the evening of the 26th of May, the first of the little ships set out. They cross during the night, navigating by compass and instinct. Some get lost, some break down. A few turn back, but most press on, following the glow of fires on the French coast, heading toward the sound of distant explosions. Arriving off Dunkirk, the small boats begin their work. It is grueling, dangerous, and relentless. The crews make trip after trip, shuttling between the beaches and the larger vessels anchored offshore. Picture yourself aboard one of these small boats, perhaps, a motor launch that normally carries pleasure seekers on Thames excursions. The channel crossing has been rough, and you arrive exhausted, salt-caked, your hands raw from handling lines. The scene before you is chaos, partially organized. You approach the beach as closely as you dare, the keel scraping sand. Soldiers wade out to meet you, the water to their chests, sometimes their necks. They clutch their rifles above their heads, trying to keep the weapons dry even now. You pull men aboard, as many as the boat will hold without swamping. They collapse into the bottom of the boat, dripping, shivering despite the May warmth, too exhausted to speak. Then you turn the boat around and head back out to sea, toward the destroyers and transport ships waiting in deeper water. The overloaded boat rides low, dangerously so. Waves slop over the gunwales. Everyone bails constantly. The trip that normally takes minutes seems to take hours. You come alongside a destroyer. The soldiers climb up nets thrown over the side, clumsy with exhaustion and waterlogged uniforms. Some fall, plunging back into the sea, and must be fished out. Once your boat is empty, you head back toward shore for another load. Hour after hour, the work continues. Some small boat crews make dozens of trips. The physical exhaustion is overwhelming. Your arms ache from handling the tiller. Your back screams from hauling men aboard. You are soaked through, chilled despite your efforts, running on nothing but will. And always there is the danger. Luftwaffe bombers attack the offshore shipping. Strafing runs by fighters rake the beaches and the boats. Shells from German artillery, moving closer each day, send up great plumes of water. Some boats are hit and sink. Others are damaged and limp back to England. A few simply disappear, their fate unknown. The evacuation runs from the 26th of May through the 4th of June, 9 days that save an army. The first day, the 26th, is tentative. Only 7,669 men are evacuated as the operation finds its rhythm. The 27th sees the Luftwaffe destroy most of Dunkirk's harbor, but the evacuation continues, and 7,669 men reach safety. On the 28th, the Belgian army surrenders, opening a gap in the defensive perimeter that must be hurriedly filled by British divisions. But weather conditions worsen, hampering German air operations, and 17,804 men are evacuated. The 29th brings a maximum effort by the Luftwaffe. The skies are clear, perfect bombing weather. The attacks are relentless, yet 47,310 soldiers are rescued. The evacuation is gaining momentum, the system of beach to ship to England functioning with increasing efficiency. The 30th of May sees bad weather return, grounding many Luftwaffe aircraft. German panzer divisions, which had resumed their advance after the halt order was lifted, withdraw from the immediate area Hitler, redirecting them toward the rest of France. On this day, 53,823 men are brought off. It is the peak day of the evacuation. Through the first days of June, the work continues. The perimeter shrinks as German forces close in. Rearguard units fight desperate holding actions to buy time for the evacuation. The situation grows more precarious by the hour, yet the boats keep coming, keep loading, keep ferrying men to safety. By the 4th of June, nearly all remaining British troops have been evacuated. Now the focus shifts to the French soldiers who have helped defend the perimeter. Through the final night, thousands more French troops are embarked. As dawn approaches on the 4th, the last boats push off. Behind them, the Germans enter Dunkirk. The final tally stuns everyone. 338,226 men evacuated. Of these, approximately 198,000 are British, 140,000 French and Belgian. It is a number beyond anyone's initial hopes, a feat that seems impossible even after it has been accomplished. But the cost must be acknowledged. The British Expeditionary Force leaves behind virtually all its equipment. Tanks, artillery, vehicles, rifles, entire divisions' worth of materiel remains in France, destroyed or captured. Britain's army has been saved, but it has been disarmed. Rebuilding will take months, perhaps years. The naval losses are significant. 6 British destroyers are sunk, 25 more damaged. Numerous smaller vessels are lost. The exact number is uncertain, as many civilian boats disappeared without trace. The RAV's fighter losses have been heavy, depleting squadrons that will be desperately needed in the coming months. And not everyone makes it off. Rearguard units fight to the last, surrendering only when the evacuation is complete, and there is no possibility of escape. Thousands of soldiers remain in France, dead or captured. The miracle of Dunkirk, real as it is, has its limits. In strict military terms, Dunkirk is a catastrophic defeat. Britain's expeditionary force has been driven from the continent. France is collapsing. The strategic situation is desperate. Yet something remarkable happens in the days following the evacuation. What should be perceived as defeat is transformed through the bravery of those involved, through the drama of the rescue, through Churchill's masterful rhetoric into a kind of victory. Churchill himself is careful not to overstate matters. In his speech to Parliament, he emphasizes, "We must be very careful not to assign to this deliverance the attributes of a victory. Wars are not won by evacuations." Yet in the same speech, he speaks of how this deliverance will buoy up British spirits, will give strength to continue the fight. The story of the little ships particularly captures the public imagination. The image of civilian volunteers sailing to rescue the army, of pleasure boats and fishing vessels facing down the might of the Wehrmacht, embodies something essential about British national identity, the determination of ordinary people rising to extraordinary challenges. This narrative, this transformation of military disaster into moral victory, will sustain British morale through the dark months ahead. When Britain stands alone against Nazi Germany, when invasion seems imminent, when the Blitz rains destruction on cities, the memory of Dunkirk will serve as proof that desperate situations can be survived, that courage and endurance matter, that defeat can be endured without surrender. Imagine yourself, finally, aboard one of the destroyers heading back to England. You are packed Beloutics with hundreds of other men. The air is close and stinks of wet wool, unwashed bodies, oil, and seawater. The ship's motion, normally barely noticeable on a destroyer, seems exaggerated with the vessel overloaded. You have made it. Against all odds, you are heading home. Around you, men react in different ways. Some talk compulsively, their words tumbling over each other, telling and retelling their experiences. Others sit in silence, staring at nothing, faces blank with exhaustion and shock. A few sleep, slumped against their neighbors, dead to the world. The journey across the channel takes hours. You emerge on deck when you can, needing air, needing to see the horizon. Behind you, the French coast recedes. The smoke from Dunkirk is still visible, a dark smudge against the sky. Ahead, the white cliffs of Dover gradually take shape. When the ship docks in England, you barely have strength to walk down the gangplank. Red Cross volunteers are there with tea and sandwiches, with blankets and cigarettes. Trains wait to take you away from the coast, to disperse you to camps and barracks across the country. You had expected censure, perhaps criticism for the defeat, for the equipment lost, for the failure of the campaign. Instead, there is relief, gratitude, even celebration. People cheer as the trains pass. Strangers press food and cigarettes on you through the carriage windows. You are being treated as heroes rather than defeated soldiers. It is bewildering. You know what happened in France was a disaster. You know how narrowly you escaped annihilation. Yet here you are, being welcomed home as though you have won some great victory. The disconnect is disorienting. In the days that follow, as you rest and recover in some barracks far from the coast, you begin to process what you experienced. The exhaustion of the retreat, the fear of the beaches, the desperate wait for evacuation, the relief of boarding a boat, the impossible journey home. You also begin to hear stories of psychological trauma, men who flinch at sudden sounds, who cannot sleep without nightmares, who find civilian life incomprehensible after what they have experienced. The term shell shock is familiar from the Great War, but there is still little understanding of trauma and less treatment available. Men are expected to carry on, to recover quickly, to be ready when the army needs them again. In the grand sweep of the war, Dunkirk is both an ending and a beginning. It marks the end of the 1940 campaign in France, the failure of Allied strategy, the triumph of German blitzkrieg tactics. But it also marks a beginning. It saves the core of Britain's professional army, experienced soldiers who will be essential in the years ahead. It demonstrates that Britain will not surrender, that the war will continue. It provides a psychological foundation for the long struggle to come. The soldiers evacuated from Dunkirk will fight again in North Africa, in Italy, in Normandy. The little ships that cross the Channel will become legend, their story told and retold. The RAF pilots who fought above the beaches will continue their battle through the summer of 1940. During the Battle of Britain, Dunkirk becomes a touchstone, a reference point. When things are desperate, and they will be desperate many times in the years ahead, people will remember Dunkirk. They will remember that a trapped army was saved, that civilian boats faced down warplanes, that defeat was survived and transformed. The memory is not entirely accurate, of course. The role of the little ships is somewhat romanticized. Most men were actually evacuated from the harbor rather than the beaches, and the Royal Navy's destroyers did the heavy lifting. But the emotional truth of the story matters more than the precise details. Dunkirk represents resilience, determination, and the refusal to accept defeat as final. Tonight, as we move through these historical landscapes, Dunkirk stands as a reminder of how close Britain came to catastrophe in 1940. Without the evacuation, the war would have taken a very different course. Perhaps Britain would have been forced to negotiate. Perhaps invasion would have succeeded. Perhaps resistance would have collapsed. But those events did not occur. Instead, 338,000 men came home. The army survived to fight another day. The war continued. Rest now in this knowledge. The desperate days of May and June 1940, the chaos of the beaches, the relentless bombing, the dangerous crossings, all have passed into history. Those men, young then, grew old or passed away. The little ships, most of them, are gone, broken up or sunk or simply rotted away. A few remain, preserved as memorials, reminders of that extraordinary week. The sea that separated France from England, the channel that the boats crossed, continues its eternal rhythm. The tides rise and fall. The beaches of Dunkirk, once crowded with desperate men, are empty now save for tourists and the markers of memory. 50 miles northwest of London, in the unremarkable town of Bletchley, stands a Victorian mansion surrounded by 50 acres of grounds. Before the war, it housed nothing more significant than a wealthy family's collections. In 1938, it quietly changes hands, purchased by the British government for purposes that remain deliberately vague. The mansion, known as Bletchley Park, becomes Station X, a designation that suggests nothing and reveals less. To the curious locals, it appears to house some sort of radio research facility. Civil servants arrive, along with equipment in unmarked crates. Temporary wooden huts begin appearing on the grounds, numbered sequentially. Hut 3, Hut 6, Hut 8. Their purpose is never explained. What happens within those huts will remain secret for 30 years after the war ends. Not one of the more than 12,000 people who work at Bletchley Park will speak of it publicly during that time. They sign the Official Secrets Act and honor it absolutely. When the war ends, they scatter to ordinary lives teachers, civil servants, housewives carrying within them knowledge that could fill libraries and saying nothing. The secret they keep is this: Bletchley Park is Britain's code-breaking center, and the men and women who work there are engaged in one of the most consequential intellectual battles of the war. They are reading Germany's most secret communications. They are, against all probability, breaking Enigma. The Enigma machine resembles a typewriter housed in a wooden box. Keyboard, lamboard, rotors, plugboard, the components appear almost mundane. But the cryptographic security these simple-seeming parts provide is, by the standards of 1940, extraordinary. At its heart, Enigma implements a polyalphabetic substitution cipher. Unlike simple substitution ciphers where A always becomes Q, for example, Enigma changes the substitution with every keystroke. Type A once, and the machine might produce Q. Type A again immediately afterward, and it produces Z. Type it a third time, and it produces M. The repeated changes create an encryption that is vastly more difficult to break than static substitution. The mechanism that achieves this complexity consists of 3, sometimes 4, rotors disks wired internally to scramble the electrical signal from each key press. Each rotor has 26 positions, corresponding to the letters of the alphabet. When an operator types a letter, electricity flows through the rotors, is reflected back through them by a reflector, and lights up a lamp on the lamboard showing the encrypted letter. Critically, the rotors step forward with each key press. The right-hand rotor steps once per keystroke. When it completes a full rotation, it causes the middle rotor to step. When the middle rotor completes its rotation, the left-hand rotor steps. This stepping mechanism ensures that the electrical pathway and thus the encryption changes continuously. The plugboard adds another layer of complexity. Before the signal even reaches the rotors, it passes through a plugboard where pairs of letters can be swapped. An operator might connect A to F, B to R, and so on up to 10 pairs of letters cross-connected. This alone multiplies the possible combinations dramatically. The total number of possible settings for a 3-rotor. Enigma with a 10-pair plugboard configuration reaches approximately 159 quintillion, that is, 159 followed by 18 zeros. A person trying combinations by hand, testing one per second, would require several human lifetimes just to make the smallest dent in the possibilities. The Germans, reasonably, believe their cipher is unbreakable. They use Enigma for military communications at all levels: battlefield orders, naval instructions, logistics, even messages from Hitler himself. The confidence in Enigma's security leads to prolific radio traffic. Thousands of messages daily, all encrypted, all transmitted in the belief that no enemy could possibly read them. This confidence, it will turn out, is misplaced. In the months before war breaks out, the government code and cipher school begins recruiting. The men and women they seek are not typical military personnel. They need mathematicians, linguists, chess players, crossword enthusiasts, anyone with a demonstrated ability to recognize patterns, solve puzzles, think logically under pressure. The recruitment process is deliberately vague. Academics at Oxford and Cambridge are approached by intermediaries. Would you be interested in doing work of national importance? We cannot tell you what it is or where it will be, but it requires your particular skills. Many accept without knowing what they are accepting. Alan Turing arrives from Cambridge in 1939. At 27, he has already published groundbreaking work in mathematical logic. His paper on computable numbers laid theoretical foundations for what will eventually become computer science. Now his abstract thinking will be applied to a very concrete problem: breaking Enigma. Dilly Knox, a classicist and veteran of Room 40, the Admiralty's code-breaking department during the First World War, brings decades of cryptanalytic experience. Gordon Welchman, another Cambridge mathematician, will make crucial contributions to organizing the code-breaking process. Women are recruited in large numbers: mathematicians like Joan Clark, linguists, clerical workers who will operate the machines and process the decrypted messages. By 1945, approximately 75% of Bletchley Park staff are women. Many recruits arrive knowing nothing about cryptography. They learn on the job through intensive training and mentorship. The work requires not just intelligence, but stamina shifts run around the clock. 8 hours on, 8 hours off in a never-ending cycle. The pressure is immense. Every hour of delay in breaking a day's settings potentially means lives lost, convoys sunk, battles lost. Britain's code-breaking effort does not start from nothing. Polish mathematicians, working for Polish military intelligence through the 1930s, made the first crucial breaks into Enigma. They reverse-engineered the machine's internal wiring, developed methods for recovering daily settings, even built mechanical devices called bombs to speed the process. When Poland falls in September 1939, Polish cryptanalysts flee to France, bringing their knowledge with them. Before the French collapse in 1940, they share their methods with the British. This transfer of information is invaluable. The Poles have given Bletchley Park a foundation to build upon. But the military Enigma machines have evolved since the Poles first broke them. More rotors, different wirings, daily changing settings. The problem has grown vastly more complex. The Polish methods, brilliant as they were, are no longer sufficient. New approaches are required. Alan Turing's crucial insight is this: while testing all possible Enigma settings is impossible, it may be possible to eliminate vast swaths of impossible settings, narrowing the field to something manageable. The method relies on cribs, guesses about what plaintext might appear in an encrypted message. If you intercept a German weather report, you can reasonably assume it contains the word wetter, wetter, weather. If you intercept a morning message, it likely contains keine besonderen Ereignis, nothing to report. These predictable phrases provide a foothold. Turing designs a machine, the bomb that can test possible Enigma settings against a crib at speed far beyond any human capability. The bomb does not decrypt messages. Instead, it eliminates incorrect settings. It is essentially a mechanical process of elimination. The first bomb, named Victory, becomes operational in March 1940. It stands about 7 feet tall and houses the equivalent of 36 Enigma machines working in parallel. When activated, the rotors whir, testing thousands of combinations. When the machine detects an internally consistent configuration, stop, it halts. Cryptanalysts then test the stop setting by hand to see if it produces German text. Even with the bomb, breaking each day's settings requires hours of work. The Germans change their settings at midnight, meaning Bletchley Park must break the new settings every day. Some days, the break comes quickly. Other days, it takes until afternoon or evening. Occasionally, a day's settings are never broken at all. As the war progresses, more bombs are built, eventually more than 200 of them, housed in various locations to distribute the workload and reduce vulnerability to bombing. Each machine requires operators to set up the rotors according to the cryptanalyst specifications, monitor the runs, record the stops. The work is tedious, exacting, and vital. The bombs are powerful tools, but they work far better when assisted by captured materials. Enigma machines themselves are not the primary prize. Bletchley Park knows how they work. What matters are the codebooks, the documents that tell German operators how to configure their machines each day. On May 9, 1941, the Royal Navy captures German submarine U-110 in the North Atlantic. The submarine, damaged and presumed sinking, is boarded by British sailors who recover the Enigma machine and, critically, the current codebooks. The capture is kept absolutely secret. The submarine sinks the next day. The Germans assume all confidential material went down with it. The codebooks allow Bletchley Park to read naval Enigma for several weeks until the keys expire. More importantly, studying the messages helps cryptanalysts understand German procedures, identify common phrases, recognize patterns. This knowledge persists even after the codebooks become outdated. Throughout the war, other captures follow. U-559 yields materials in October 1942, though at the cost of 2 British sailors who drown when the submarine sinks while they are still aboard trying to retrieve documents. Each capture provides temporary access to German communications and long-term improvements to braking methods. Hut 8 focuses on German naval communications, particularly the U-boat traffic that is strangling Britain's supply lines. Alan Turing heads this section initially, later joined by others as the work expands. Naval Enigma is especially difficult. The German Navy uses 4-rotor Enigma machines, rather than 3, multiplying the possible settings 26-fold. The messages are often short, reducing the cryptanalyst's opportunities to exploit patterns. And the stakes could not be higher. Britain is an island that imports much of its food and fuel. If the U-boats cut the Atlantic supply lines, Britain will be starved into submission. Through 1941 and into 1942, the battle in the Atlantic seesaws. When Bletchley Park is reading U-boat Enigma, convoy routes can be adjusted to avoid wolf packs. Merchant ship losses dropped dramatically by more than 2/3 in July 1941. When the codebreakers lose the ability to read the traffic as happens in February 1942, when the Germans add the 4th rotor, losses surge back to catastrophic levels. The pressure on Hut 8 during these blackout periods is enormous. Men and women work double shifts, surviving on tea and cigarettes and determination. The cryptanalysts know that every day they fail to break the code, ships are sinking, sailors are dying. The abstraction of mathematics acquires terrible urgency when lives depend on the solutions. Eventually, the naval Enigma is mastered. The combination of improved cribs, better bombs, captured materials, and sheer persistence allows Bletchley Park to read U-boat traffic with increasing reliability. By late 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic has turned decisively in the Allies' favor. The U-boat menace, while never eliminated entirely, ceases to threaten Britain's survival. The decrypted messages are designated Ultra, a classification above top secret, indicating their extraordinary sensitivity. Ultra intelligence flows from Bletchley Park to military commanders through carefully controlled channels designed to prevent the Germans from realizing their communications are compromised. Using ultra intelligence requires extreme care. If the Allies respond too obviously to decrypted information, the Germans will suspect their cipher is broken and change it. So the Allies develop elaborate procedures for disguising their knowledge. A convoy receives warning of U-boat positions from Ultra, but before ordering the convoy to change course, a reconnaissance aircraft is sent to scupper the U-boats. The convoy then changes route based on the aircraft sighting, not the decrypted message. The Germans, monitoring Allied communications, hear about the aircraft sighting and conclude correctly, as far as they know, that the convoy was redirected based on visual reconnaissance. This deception is maintained rigorously throughout the war. Ships are sometimes allowed to be sunk. Battles are sometimes lost, when saving them would too clearly indicate foreknowledge. The calculus is brutal. Lose this battle to preserve the source that will help win the war. Ultra-intelligence affects nearly every theater of the war. In North Africa, British commanders read Rommel's supply requests and fuel status, allowing them to time attacks when the Afrika Korps is most vulnerable. In the Mediterranean, ultra-intelligence enables the Royal Navy's decisive victory at Cape Matapan, where Italian ships are ambushed with devastating effect. Before D-Day, Ultra confirms that German forces believe the invasion will come at Calais rather than Normandy, allowing the deception to continue. Winston Churchill is briefed daily on ultra-intelligence. He calls the Bletchley Park staff the geese that laid the golden eggs and never cackled. The information shapes strategic decisions at the highest levels. Hitler's messages to his commanders are sometimes read at Bletchley Park before the commanders themselves receive them. Imagine yourself working in one of the huts at Bletchley Park. Your shift begins at midnight 8 hours through the dark early morning hours. The hut is cold despite the small stove. In winter, your fingers grow numb, making it difficult to transcribe the decrypted text without errors. The work is repetitive. You sit at a table with intercepted messages, attempting to apply the day's settings once they are discovered, or working through cribs, or operating one of the bombs. The rotation of the bomb's drums creates a constant background hum. The smell of machine oil and cigarette smoke permeates everything. You cannot discuss your work outside the hut. Not with family, not with friends, not even with colleagues working in other huts on different aspects of the problem. The compartmentalization is absolute. You know your small piece of the process and nothing more. The stress accumulates over months and years. The knowledge that your work matters, that lives depend on it, creates pressure that never entirely lifts. Some people thrive under it. Others crack quietly, suffering breakdowns that cannot be explained because the work itself cannot be explained. Yet there is also camaraderie. Shared purpose binds the staff together. When a particularly difficult problem is solved, when a crucial break-in occurs, the satisfaction is profound. These moments of triumph, shared with colleagues who understand their significance, provide meaning that sustains through the exhaustion and tedium. Social life at Bletchley Park develops its own peculiar character. Dances, theatrical productions, chess tournaments, activities that allow the staff to socialize without discussing their work. Romances bloom. Some couples marry, bound not just by affection, but by shared secrets they can never reveal to outsiders. When the war ends in May 1945, Bletchley Park does not celebrate publicly. The staff disperse quietly to civilian life. The machinery is dismantled or destroyed. Documents are locked away or burned. The temporary huts remain, but their purpose is never officially acknowledged. For 30 years, the Official Secrets Act maintains its grip. The men and women who broke Enigma say nothing. They attend reunions of wartime colleagues, at which the work is never mentioned. They watch films and read books about the war that make no reference to ultra-intelligence, and they remain silent. Alan Turing, whose contributions were fundamental, receives no public recognition. He returns to academic work, continues his groundbreaking research into computation and artificial intelligence. In 1952, he is prosecuted for homosexuality, then illegal in Britain and chemically castrated. In 1954, he dies from cyanide poisoning, officially ruled a suicide. The nation he served so brilliantly has no idea of the magnitude of his service. The secret remains locked. Not until the mid-1970s does information about Bletchley Park begin to emerge. F.W. Winterbotham's book, The Ultra Secret, published in 1974, is the first public account. Gradually, other memoirs follow. The full story emerges slowly, piece by piece, as the Official Secrets Act's constraints are relaxed and former codebreakers finally speak. Even now, some aspects remain classified. Some files have never been opened. The British government maintains certain secrecy around wartime code-breaking operations, the full extent of which may never be publicly known. Quantifying Ultra's contribution to Allied victory is difficult, but attempts have been made. Historians and military analysts have studied operational records, comparing outcomes before and after Ultra intelligence became available, assessing how decisions were influenced by decrypted information. General Dwight Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, wrote to the Bletchley Park staff after the war, expressing his heartfelt admiration and sincere thanks, stated that the intelligence from Bletchley Park had been of priceless value, had saved countless British and American lives, and had contributed to the speed with which the enemy was routed and eventually forced to surrender. The most commonly cited estimate is that Bletchley Park shortened the war by approximately 2 years. Some historians suggest the figure might be higher, perhaps as much as 4 years. These are not precise calculations. They are informed estimates based on assessing how much longer various campaigns might have lasted without Ultra intelligence. Consider what 2 years means. In 1943 to 1945, the war killed millions annually. The Holocaust's death factories operated at peak capacity. Cities were bombed, populations were starved, armies clashed in battles of horrific scale. 2 years fewer of this carnage represents millions of lives preserved, millions of families not destroyed, countless suffering prevented. The Battle of the Atlantic, which Churchill called the dominating factor all through the war, was substantially influenced by Bletchley Park's ability to read U-boat communications. Without that capability, Britain might have been starved into negotiated peace. The entire course of the war would have been different. In North Africa, Ultra intelligence enabled British forces to defeat Rommel's Afrika Korps, despite often being outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Knowing German supply situations, fuel status, and intended operations allowed British commanders to fight smarter rather than simply fighting harder. Before D-Day, Ultra confirmed that German forces were fooled by Allied deception operations. The invasion succeeded in part because German reinforcements were held back, awaiting a main invasion at Calais that never came. There is something remarkable about the contrast between the violence of war and the methods used at Bletchley Park to combat it. While soldiers fought with guns and tanks, while sailors battled U-boats in freezing Atlantic waters, while airmen dueled over France and Germany, a few thousand people in a country mansion fought with mathematics and logic. They were not immune to danger. Bletchley Park could have been bombed, and living in wartime Britain carried risks. But their primary weapons were intelligence, pattern recognition, relentless systematic thinking. Their battlefield was symbolic rather than physical. Yet their impact on the war's outcome was as significant as any army's. This form of heroism, quiet, intellectual, hidden even from contemporaries, lacks the obvious drama of battlefield courage. There are no medals for solving a cryptographic problem, no monuments to commemorate a successful break-in to an enemy cipher. For decades, there was not even acknowledgement that the work had occurred. Alan Turing's wartime contributions saved countless lives. His theoretical work laid foundations for the computer age that would transform human civilization. Yet he died in obscurity and disgrace, prosecuted by the government he had served, his achievements unknown to the public. Only decades later was he recognized, posthumously pardoned in 2013, honored with memorials, his face placed on the 50-pound note. Today, Bletchley Park is a museum. The huts have been restored. The bombs have been rebuilt by volunteers working from fragmentary documentation and surviving photographs. Visitors walk the grounds where the code breakers walked, Stand in the rooms where Enigma was broken and try to imagine what it was like. The former staff, those who survive, are finally able to speak. In their 80s and 90s, they give interviews, write memoirs, share stories that were locked inside them for half a century. There is relief in the telling, and pride, justifiable pride in work that mattered enormously and was done extraordinarily well. The secrecy, necessary as it was during and immediately after the war, exacted its own cost. Recognition delayed is recognition diminished. Contributions unacknowledged leave wounds. But the truth, eventually, emerges. The story of Bletchley Park, of Enigma and Ultra, of the mathematicians and linguists and machine operators who fought their quiet war, becomes part of the historical record. Rest now with this knowledge. The rotors that once turned in Enigma machines, scrambling messages across European airwaves, are still. The bombs that whirred through endless combinations are silent. The huts at Bletchley Park, once filled with intense concentration and whispered conversations and the clatter of typewriters, stand empty save for visitors. The war they helped to win ended 80 years ago. The secrets they kept for 3 decades are secrets no longer. The mathematics they employed, elegant, abstract, beautiful, in their logic, served their purpose and passed into history. The people who worked there, brilliant and ordinary, stressed and determined, have mostly passed away now. But their legacy endures. In the lives their work saved, in the war, their intelligence helped win. In the demonstration that human ingenuity, applied with sufficient determination, can solve even the most formidable problems. On the 8th of January, 1940, rationing begins. Every person in Britain, man, woman, child receives a ration book containing coupons. The books are color-coded: buff for adults, green for children under 5, blue for children aged 5 to 16. Your identity, for purposes of food distribution, is now tied to this small booklet of paper slips. The system is straightforward in theory. To purchase rationed goods, you must register with specific shops, a butcher, a grocer, perhaps a dairy. The shopkeeper receives allocations based on the number of registered customers. When you buy rationed items, the shopkeeper cuts or stamps the relevant coupons from your book. Without coupons, you cannot buy. Without registration, you receive no allocation. Initially, the rationed items are few: bacon, butter, and sugar. 4 ounces of bacon per person per week. 4 ounces of butter. 12 ounces of sugar. The restrictions seem manageable, temporary. Surely the war will not last long enough for this to become normal. But the war does last, and rationing expands. By mid-1942, the system covers nearly everything: meat, cheese, tea, jam, eggs, milk. Clothing requires coupons from June 1941 address. Costs 11 coupons, trousers 8, a pair of women's shoes 5. Soap is rationed from February 1942, becoming one of the most valued Christmas gifts that year. Fuel rationing restricts coal and heating oil. Petrol is rationed from September 1939, initially allowing civilian drivers mere gallons per month before private motoring is prohibited almost entirely. The restrictions touch every aspect of daily life. Nothing is taken for granted anymore. Every meal, every article of clothing, every warm bath becomes a matter of careful calculation and coupons. In December 1941, a supplementary system is introduced: points rationing. Unlike the fixed allowances for basic foods, the point system offers flexibility within limits. Each person receives a points allocation, initially 16 points every 4 weeks, later fluctuating between 16 and 32 points depending on availability. These points can be spent on designated goods: tinned foods, dried fruit, cereals, biscuits, rice, syrup, treacle. The number of points required for each item varies based on supply and demand. A tin of salmon might cost 16 points when supplies are scarce, 8 points when more is available. Dried fruit might require 2 points per pound 1 month, 4 points the next. The Ministry of Food adjusts the values, using points as a mechanism to distribute limited supplies without outright prohibition. The brilliance of the point system lies in its allowance for personal preference. If you value tinned meat highly, you can spend all your points on it, foregoing biscuits and dried fruit. If your household particularly wants rice, you allocate points accordingly. The system provides agency within scarcity, not freedom, exactly, but choice of a sort. Shopping becomes a strategic exercise. You calculate which items offer best value in points, which are most needed, which can be foregone. Housewives develop expertise in points optimization that rivals any accountant's skill. Children learn arithmetic through rationing. If tinned peas cost 4 points and we have 16 points remaining, how many tins can we buy? One of rationing's most profound effects is social rather than nutritional. It creates unprecedented equality of consumption. For the first time in modern British history, rich and poor eat similar diets. Before the war, class distinctions were vividly expressed through food. The wealthy ate meat daily, fresh fruits year-round, butter on their bread. The poor subsisted on bread, margarine, tea with condensed milk, the occasional bit of cheap meat. Malnutrition was common in working-class districts. Rickets, caused by vitamin D deficiency, affected poor children disproportionately. Rationing changes this. Everyone, regardless of wealth or status, receives the same allocation. Lord Woolton, Minister of Food, makes this explicit policy. The rationing system aims to provide adequate nutrition for all, with no special privileges for the wealthy. The sole exception is workers in certain occupations, miners, forestry workers, land girls, who receive extra cheese because their work prevents them from accessing canteen meals. The rich can no longer simply buy abundance. Money alone cannot procure more meat, more butter, more sugar. You can eat in restaurants, which are not rationed in the same way, but even restaurants must work within allocation systems. The black market exists, of course, but social pressure against it is strong. Hoarding and black market dealing are seen as unpatriotic, selfish, a betrayal of collective sacrifice. Paradoxically, rationing improves working-class health. The guaranteed minimum, modest as it is, exceeds what many poor families could afford before the war. Subsidies keep prices low for essential items. Free milk, orange juice, and cod liver oil for children and expectant mothers ensure that the most vulnerable receive adequate nutrition. Studies conducted during the war results, kept secret until afterward, confirm this. Infant mortality declines, life expectancy rises, overall health of the working class improves. The war's privations, ironically, create a more equitably fed nation. One observer notes in 1943, the British people are frequently told emphatically that the rich now get less to eat, which does them no harm, and the poor get a diet adequate for health, with priority for mothers and children. This is a great achievement. Rationing requires not just acceptance, but active adaptation. Recipes must be reimagined. Clothing must last far longer than intended. Ingenuity becomes a survival skill. The Ministry of Food publishes recipes designed for rationed ingredients. Woolton pie, named for Lord Woolton, becomes infamous a vegetable pie using whatever is available. Carrots, turnips, potatoes, oatmeal for thickening, no meat. It is nutritious and cheap, and by most accounts, barely palatable. But people eat it because alternatives do not exist. Bread is never rationed during the war itself. It becomes a staple that compensates for shortages elsewhere. Potatoes remain unrationed too, forming the base of countless meals. Fresh vegetables, when available from gardens or markets, help extend the diet beyond the bare rations. Eggs are scarce, 1 per person per week when available, sometimes none. Dried egg powder from America supplements the supply. The powder makes adequate scrambled eggs if you do not think too hard about what eggs used to taste like. For baking, it serves adequately, though the texture is never quite right. Sugar rationing forces adaptation in tea and coffee, in baking, in every dessert. Saccharin tablets become common, though the metallic aftertaste never quite disappears. Jam is rationed, but prized a spoonful, transforms plain bread into something approaching pleasure. Clothing rationing presents different challenges. Garments must be mended repeatedly. Make, do, and mend becomes the government slogan, accompanied by guides on darning socks, patching trousers, turning collar and cuffs on shirts to extend their life. Women learn to unpick old garments and reknit the wool into new items. Parachute silk, when obtainable, becomes prized material for undergarments and blouses. Children's clothing requires particular management. Growing children need new clothes regularly, but coupons are limited. A system develops. When children outgrow clothing, families can exchange the old items at collection centers for extra coupons or for second-hand clothing in larger sizes. Nothing is wasted. Everything has value. The throwaway culture of later decades is unimaginable in 1942. In factories across Britain, women do work that was exclusively male just years before. The conscription of men into military service creates enormous labor shortages in essential industries. Women fill the gap, and in doing so, transform both the war effort and their own lives. By 1943, approximately 7 million women work in the war effort. Around 950,000 labor in munitions factories, making shells, bullets, bombs. Over half the workforce in the chemical and explosive industry is female. In Royal Ordnance factories, women constitute 60% of employees. In the newest facilities, 80%. The work is demanding and dangerous. Munitions workers nicknamed munitionettes, or canary girls, because the chemicals turn their skin yellow-handle toxic substances with minimal protection. They mix explosives, fill shells, assemble fuses. The hours are long. 56-hour weeks are standard, sometimes 7 days without a break. Accidents happen. At the Royal Ordnance Factory in Kirby, Lancashire, in February 1944, an explosion kills 19 workers, mostly women. They were filling anti-tank mine fuses when one detonated, triggering the others. The work they do, essential as it is, carries the risk of sudden, violent death. But there is also pride in the work. Women who had been shop assistants, domestic servants, or office clerks now operate lathes, weld steel, assemble aircraft components. They learn skills traditionally reserved for men and prove themselves capable. One woman recalls, "I knew I was stuffing something in for the war, and I knew it would go up with a bang, and that was really all that concerned me." The sense of contributing directly to victory provides meaning that transcends the exhaustion. Pay is better than most pre-war women's work, though still less than men receive for equivalent tasks. The money provides independence. Women who had previously depended on fathers or husbands now earn their own wages, control their own finances, make their own decisions. This taste of economic autonomy will not be easily relinquished when the war ends. The Women's Land Army, reformed in 1939 after existing during the First World War, recruits women to work on farms. With agricultural laborers conscripted and food production more critical than ever, women must cultivate the land. By the war's peak, approximately 80,000 land girls work on British farms. They come primarily from cities and towns, many with no agricultural experience whatsoever. Training is brief, sometimes just weeks, covering basics: planting, harvesting, operating machinery, animal husbandry. The work is physically punishing. 48-hour weeks in winter, 50 hours in summer, performing tasks that require strength and endurance. Plowing fields, digging drainage ditches, hauling feed sacks, milking cows by hand in cold pre-dawn darkness. The work continues regardless of weather. Rain, cold, mud, none of these are excuses for stopping. Around 25% of land girls work in dairy farming, tending cows, milking twice daily, managing the production of milk, butter, cheese. Others specialize in tasks that seem improbable. Rat-catching teams kill thousands of rats annually, protecting grain stores. Some work in pest control, managing foxes and rabbits that threaten crops. Others undertake land reclamation, transforming marginal land into productive farmland. The farmers, mostly older men, accustomed to working alone or with experienced hands, are initially skeptical of these urban girls who cannot tell wheat from barley. But necessity overcomes prejudice. Most land girls prove themselves capable, and grudging respect develops. The minimum wage for land girls is 28 shillings per week, with deductions for board and lodging. This is significantly less than male agricultural workers' 38 shillings, and far below munitions workers' pay. The inequality is accepted because that is simply how things are. Women's work, regardless of its difficulty or importance, is valued less. Some land girls grow genuinely attached to rural life, to the animals they tend, to the rhythm of agricultural seasons. Others endure, counting days until the war ends and they can return to cities. But all contribute to keeping Britain fed during its most desperate years. In May 1940, with the British Expeditionary Force trapped at Dunkirk, an invasion seemingly imminent, Secretary of State for War Anthony Eden makes a radio broadcast calling for volunteers. Men aged 17 to 65, ineligible for regular military service, are invited to join the local defense volunteers, later renamed the Home Guard. The response is overwhelming. Within hours, men queue at police stations to enroll. By July, nearly 1.5 million have volunteered. They are too old for military service, or too young, or in reserved occupations, or physically unfit. Many are Great War veterans, their soldiering days supposedly behind them. Initially, the Home Guard is absurdly under-equipped. There are rifles for perhaps 1/3 of volunteers. The rest carry shotguns, sporting rifles, or improvised weapons clubs, pitchforks, in one famous case, golf clubs. Uniforms are scarce. Men wear civilian clothes with armbands identifying them as LDV. The nickname Dad's Army emerges, affectionately mocking the force's composition older men playing at soldiers. Later, the BBC sitcom of that name will cement this image. But the reality is more complex and more serious. As equipment arrives and training improves, the Home Guard becomes a genuine defensive force. By 1942, they operate anti-aircraft guns, coastal artillery, rocket batteries. They shoot down Luftwaffe aircraft and V-1 flying bombs. They dig defenses, guard supply routes, patrol coasts, man observation posts. Their duties are continuous and unglamorous. After working a full day in factory or office, Home Guard members report for drill, training, patrol. They spend nights watching from cold observation posts, checking identity papers at roadblocks, ready to sound alarm if parachutists land. The commitment is substantial, the recognition minimal. In the event of invasion, the Home Guard would have been first responders buying time with their lives for regular forces to mobilize. That invasion never comes, but the threat remains real enough throughout 1940 and 1941. These men, too old or too unfit or too essential in their civilian work to join the regular army, nonetheless put themselves in harm's way. When the Home Guard is stood down in December 1944, with invasion no longer possible, they disperse quietly to civilian life. Their service, like so much wartime contribution, was given freely and acknowledged briefly. Air, raid precautions, ARP services form the backbone of civilian defense during the Blitz. At their heart are the air raid wardens, men and women who patrol streets during air raids and ensure compliance with blackout regulations. The blackout is absolute. No light must be visible from outside. Windows are covered with heavy curtains or blackout material. Street lights are extinguished. Vehicle headlights are fitted with covers that reduce them to narrow slits. The goal is to prevent German bombers from navigating by ground lights. Wardens patrol during blackout hours, watching for any light leaking from windows. When they spot a violation, they knock sharply and shout the immortal phrase, "Put that light out." Persistent offenders are reported to police. The vigilance is necessary. A single visible light could guide bombers to residential areas. During air raids, wardens' duties multiply. They sound sirens, guide civilians to shelters, watch for bombs, render first aid, fight small fires with sandbags and stirrup pumps. When a bomb falls in their sector, they assess damage, call emergency services, begin rescue operations if people are trapped. The work is dangerous. Wardens patrol during raids, exposed to bombs and shrapnel, while others shelter. They deal with unexploded bombs' massive cylinders that might detonate at any moment, evacuating surrounding areas and marking locations for bomb disposal teams. After raids, wardens help bombed-out families find temporary accommodation, salvage belongings from damaged homes, navigate the bureaucracy of emergency relief. They are part emergency responder, part social worker, part local authority representative. Most air raid wardens are volunteers, serving without pay while maintaining regular employment. They give their time, their sleep, sometimes their lives, motivated by duty and community solidarity. The neighborhoods they protect are their own. The people they help are neighbors, friends, family. In 1940, the Ministry of Agriculture launches the Dig for Victory campaign, encouraging citizens to convert every available plot into vegetable gardens. Public parks, school playing fields, railway embankments, even the grounds of Oxford colleges are transformed into allotments. The campaign is practical necessity. Britain imports much of its food, and U-boat attacks threaten supply lines. Homegrown vegetables supplement rations and reduce dependence on imports. The Ministry of Food provides instruction: how to prepare soil, when to plant, how to maximize yield, how to grow food year-round. Gardens that once grew ornamental flowers now produce cabbages, potatoes, carrots, turnips. Lawns are dug up for onions and beans. Flower beds become lettuce patches. The aesthetic of suburban gardening shifts from beauty to utility. Families without gardens apply for allotments, small plots of public land allocated for cultivation. Demand far exceeds supply. People who have never gardened before learn through trial and error, supplemented by government leaflets and radio programs offering advice. The effort yields results. By 1943, domestic food production has increased substantially. Every potato grown in a back garden is one less that must be imported. Every cabbage reduces pressure on the rationing system. The individual contributions seem small, but collectively they matter. A campaign also provides psychological benefits. Gardening offers purpose and control in a time when so much is beyond control. Watching vegetables grow from seeds planted by your own hands provides satisfaction that transcends calorie counts. Children learn where food comes from, develop appreciation for the labor of cultivation. The shared experience of hardship creates bonds that cross class boundaries in unprecedented ways. In air raid shelters, whether public shelters, Anderson shelters in back gardens, or tube stations pressed into service people from different backgrounds huddled together through long nights, a bank manager and a factory worker share a bench in a tube station shelter. A suburban housewife and a charwoman from the slums wait out a raid in a public shelter, their children playing together on the floor. Shared danger creates camaraderie that peacetime class distinctions would normally prevent. Stories circulate of kindness, neighbors sharing tea and blankets, strangers helping to dig out bombed houses, communities rallying to support families who have lost everything. The experience of total war, where no one is entirely safe, where any home might be hit, creates solidarity born of shared vulnerability. British restaurants, established by the government, provide affordable cooked meals outside the rationing system. Anyone can eat at these communal dining rooms, paying a modest price for a hot meal prepared with collectively purchased ingredients. They feed workers whose homes have been bombed, provide relief for exhausted housewives, serve as gathering places where class mixing occurs naturally. The experience is not universally utopian. Class tensions persist. Resentments over inequality continue. But the war undeniably creates moments and spaces where social barriers are temporarily lowered, where common purpose matters more than social status. The welfare state. Expectations created. In 1942, William Beveridge publishes his report on social insurance and allied services. The Beveridge Report, as it becomes known, outlines a comprehensive system of social security for post-war Britain. Compulsory insurance against unemployment, sickness, and old age. Family allowances. A national health service. Commitment to full employment. The report becomes a bestseller. Hundreds of thousands of copies are sold. People discuss it in shelters, in pews, in factories. It represents a vision of what the war is being fought for, not merely defeating Germany, but building a better Britain afterward. The logic is compelling. If the nation can mobilize totally for war conscripting labor, directing resources, ensuring everyone is fed and housed, then surely similar mobilization can address peacetime poverty, illness, unemployment. If rationing can guarantee minimum nutrition for all during wartime, why cannot the state guarantee minimum welfare for all in peace? The experience of wartime collectivism rationing, evacuation, national service, directed labor normalizes state intervention in ways unthinkable before 1939. The government has proven it can organize on massive scale, can distribute resources equitably, can ensure, however imperfectly, that no one is left without basics. These lessons will shape post-war politics. When the war ends, expectations have been fundamentally altered. The population that endured rationing, bombing, separation, and loss will not accept a return to pre-war inequalities. They have borne shared sacrifice. They expect shared benefit. This pressure will lead to the creation of the National Health Service in 1948, expansion of education, construction of public housing, implementation of much of Beveridge's vision. The war, in this sense, becomes a catalyst for social transformation. The home front experienced rationing's enforced equality, women's demonstrated capabilities, communal solidarity in shelters, collective mobilization for national survival, creates conditions and expectations that reshape Britain for generations. Yet beneath the solidarity and purpose runs a current of profound exhaustion. The war goes on and on. Years of rationing, of making do, of constant low-level anxiety wear away at resilience. Housewives managing rations, queuing for hours for goods that might not arrive, creating meals from inadequate ingredients, washing clothes with limited soap, mending garments beyond any reasonable repair. This work is relentless and unending. There are no days off from rationing. Every meal requires planning. Every purchase requires calculation. The mental load is substantial. Workers in factories, 12-hour shifts, 6 or 7 days a week, for months on end survive on determination and strong tea. The work is monotonous and exhausting. Mistakes happen. Accidents occur more frequently as people grow tired. The uncertainty wears at nerves. Men overseas might be dead. No news does not mean safety. Cities are bombed irregularly, but unpredictably. You never know when the sirens might sound. The war dominates everything. Normal life is suspended indefinitely. By 1944, after 5 years of war, the population is exhausted in ways that victory parades cannot fully address. The deprivations continue, even after victory rationing will last until 1954, 9 years after the war ends. Bread, never rationed during the war, is rationed from 1946 to 1948. The promised better world takes years to materialize. Imagine yourself now, in the present, looking back across those years. The Britain of 1940 to 1945 is a different world, harder, colder, hungrier, yet in some ways more unified than the comfortable present. Rationing, with all its hardships, created fairness that seemed radical at the time and seems remarkable in retrospect. Women's capabilities, demonstrated in factories and farms, could not be entirely dismissed once the war ended, though many were pushed back into domestic roles. The communal spirit of shelters and shared sacrifice influenced post-war social policy. The home front transformed Britain not through traumatic moments, but through the accumulated weight of daily choices, daily sacrifices, daily endurance. The woman saving coupons to clothe her children, the munitions worker on her third consecutive night shift, the home guard volunteer patrolling in cold darkness, the air raid warden digging survivors from rubble, the land girl learning to plow a field, the housewife creating meals from rations that should not stretch to feed a family, but somehow do. These were the people who sustained Britain through its most desperate years, not through heroic action, but through stubborn, unglamorous persistence. They endured because there was no alternative, and in enduring, they shaped the nation that would emerge from the war. And so we reach the end of our journey through wartime Britain. We have walked with evacuee children torn from their homes, stood on the beaches of Dunkirk, entered the secret world of Bletchley Park, and lived through the daily struggles of the home front. These experiences separation, danger, intellectual challenge, and endurance defined a generation and shaped a nation. The war ended 80 years ago. Those who lived through it are mostly gone now, but their experiences echo forward, shaping the Britain that emerged from the war. The welfare state, the National Health Service, changed expectations about women's roles, altered class relationships. The suffering was real and immense, but it was not without meaning. The society they built from wartime experiences, however imperfectly, represented their hope that such suffering might lead to something better. Rest now, with these stories held gently in mind. The past is past. The struggles have ended. Those children returned home. Those soldiers came back from Dunkirk. Those codebreakers kept their secrets and eventually told them. Those home front families endured and survived. The war that consumed the world for 6 years is history now, fading from living memory into books and museums and quiet remembrance. Let these stories settle into your mind as you drift toward sleep, honoring without glorifying, remembering without reliving, acknowledging the past while resting in the present's peace. Good night. The Second World War transformed Britain in ways both visible and invisible. The physical scars bombed cities, lost lives were evident, but the psychological and social transformations ran deeper, shaping expectations, relationships, and national identity for generations. The evacuee children carried their experiences through entire lives, some scarred by separation, others strengthened by resilience, all marked by displacement they never fully forgot. Dunkirk became mythical, a symbol of survival against odds, though the men who lived it remembered the fear and chaos more than the triumph. Bletchley Park's codebreakers kept silent for decades, their crucial contributions unacknowledged until they were elderly or gone. The home front's daily endurance rationing, women's work, communal sacrifice created expectations for a more equitable post-war society. Britain emerged victorious but exhausted, nearly bankrupt, its empire crumbling, its cities damaged, its population worn by 6 years of total war. Yet it also emerged transformed, more egalitarian, more committed to collective welfare, more aware that shared sacrifice required shared benefit. Tonight, we remember these experiences not to glorify war, but to honor endurance. We remember so that the struggles and sacrifices are not forgotten, so that the lessons learned about resilience, solidarity, the costs of conflict, are not lost. But now, let memory rest. Let the past remain past. Let yourself drift into sleep, carrying these stories lightly, knowing they have been told, witnessed, and honored. The war that shaped a generation is history now, and you are here, in the present, safe and warm, ready for rest. Sleep well.